Home is where our stories begin. Our Town, Our Kids works with local Kansas communities to reduce the number of their youth at risk for involvement in the juvenile justice system. Hello, welcome to Stepping Up. I'm Sue Williams, Project Director for Our Town, Our Kids. In this session, we're going to be looking at a specific kind of competency, cultural clues, and communication. This particular quote is interesting to me because it refers to our common heritage as human beings, but also our uniqueness, as well as the rich diversity among us. And this is a good reminder as we begin to talk about cultural competency. The session will be organized into 3 parts: cultural respect and why it's important, collaborative problem solving, and finally some practical applications. This will include a little segment on place matters and also tips and culturally competent communication. So let's dig right in with one particular concept called cultural respect. If we could gather together only one word that I think encapsulates the message that we're trying to relay today, that would be respect. As those of us who work in juvenile justice initiatives and with youth in general, we know and acknowledge that that's a baseline, that we can set an example, that we can be a role model for kids and sometimes vice versa in bringing respect to our communication channels and our everyday life. So that's where it all begins. The underlying philosophy of cultural respect is that it's not just one thing and that it's fluid, right? It's ever changing. This includes a body of knowledge, a body of belief, and a body of behavior. And when you think about it, all of those 3 are interrelated. If we are all sort of on the same page, so to speak, with the knowledge, the facts, the truth, the scientific evidence about a particular aspect, we know that that feeds into our belief system, and in turn, that affects our knowledge and the translation that we place on any kind of activity after that. So within our intergroup communication, in the study circles, we will come back to this idea over and over. How do we acknowledge and show cultural respect in our work, and especially with our youth? So just as some sort of reminders, we might look at this and not understand exactly what's going on, but we do have a point of reference. The idea is, as the African proverb says here, the stranger sees only what he knows. So we use our own experiences, our own point of reference to convey interpretation and meaning onto the picture. At first, it might seem a little strange to us, and then we might observe, well, it seems to be sort of a mix between traditional and modern cultures. We might not be necessarily intimidated, however, because they seem friendly. There's some things that are universal, and one of those is a smile, right? So they're smiling. So we might not have too much angst. However, the unknown, the unfamiliar, always brings a certain amount of anxiety. So we need to be aware of that and be prepared for that. Here, for example, we might feel a little more uncomfortable. We don't know what's going on. We don't know exactly what to expect. Maybe we don't really have a point of reference to understand this, and uncertainty causes anxiety. This image could even be interpreted as menacing. The unfamiliar always causes us to at least pause for a bit. And those pauses can be important because that gives us an opportunity to perhaps reframe or to seek further understanding. Some of the images we're at least semi-familiar with, and this is probably one. Probably most of us have seen something sort of like this associated with American Indian groups. And at least here in the U.S., we tend to romanticize the Native American history. When we begin to enhance our knowledge, however, about the dance and its history and its symbolic meaning behind it, then we might also have a challenge to our belief system, which in turn presents some kind of clues to how our behavior might align or change with that belief system. In this example, for example, the image is reminiscent of the ghost dance. This is associated with several Native American belief systems. It was first associated with white expansion into the Indian Territory, and it was originally meant to represent goals of living a clean, honest life, as well as cross-cultural cooperation between the Indians and the white settlers. This ideal, however, soon became connected to conflict and militarism. The government eventually outlawed the dance, and it became a rallying cry for the two massacres known as Wounded Knee 1 and Wounded Knee 2, the slaughter of hundreds of Native Americans. The Dawes Act, which was a legislative action at that time, was aimed to abolish tribal and communal land ownership, to take the land from them, transferring it to white settlers, and then forcing assimilation into mainstream American society. So this is just a very short example of how if we deepen our knowledge into a particular area, it also may be an effective in changing our belief system and our behavior. So we need to get it right to begin with, right? Cultural markers also take on different meanings depending on the situation, the location, the culture, depending on its intent and purposes. And I wanted to share this little short one with you. Sawubona is a Zulu tribe greeting, and the literal translation is, I see you. So we might at first assume that it's similar to our saying, hi, how are you? Hello, have a good day. How are you doing? Those sorts of things. But it's not that casual. In the Zulu tribe, it means much more. It also says, I see you as you are. You are important to me, and I value you. I see you. I really see you. So while we might say something similar, for the Zulus, it takes a much more deep meaning in making the other person visible, in the acceptance of them as a person with all of their nuances and flaws and values and virtues. In response, in return, the recipient will usually say Shaboka, which means I exist for you. So it's a very mutual two-way acknowledgement of each person and their value to the relationship. The inference is all of my attention is with you. I see you. I allow myself to discover your needs, your fears, to identify your mistakes and accept them. I accept you for what you are, and you are a part of me. A much different communal approach than we do in Western civilization, and especially in America, where we have a great tradition of emphasis on individualism. So it reaches much beyond a ritualized greeting. So I challenge you in your groups maybe to start using Sawubona. Sawubona. And just the inference may change the way you think about that interaction with other people. It's a very community-oriented concept, right? So to be competent, to work toward cultural competency, it's critical that we are reducing disparities of many kinds, and that Sawubona, I think, is one little tool that we might try out in terms of that. It enables the system to function more effectively, and we're all working within a system, but in particular, we're looking now at the juvenile justice system. When combined with effective communication, it is critical for achieving accuracy. Accuracy, because we want that connection and we want it to be based on knowledge, right? As a matter of fact, cultural competency has now been adopted by the National Institute of Health as the national CLAS standard an acronym for National Standards for Culturally and Linguistically Appropriate Services. So it's that important that something as expansive as the National Institute of Health has adopted it as one of their core competencies to be achieved by people who adhere to their system. So again, we come back to cultural respect. And again, you can see from some of these examples that it includes a body of knowledge, a body of belief, and a body of behavior, and the interrelationship among the three. So we have to make sure that we get them right. One way to underscore the connectedness of these three entities, the knowledge, belief, and behavior systems, is to look more deeply into our everyday taken for granted assumptions and concepts. In this image on the left, we see the word equality. Here in America, that means the American dream, that we should have equal opportunities for all, that that's an ideal that we want to achieve and indeed is achievable. It seems to roll off our tongue. We all would raise our hands and say that we believe in equality, whether or not we really have a full understanding of what that might mean. On the right, however, we have a similar concept called equity, but in a completely different light this time, right? So here we see that the emphasis is not just on opportunity, but depending on the foundations, the structures, the building blocks, if you will, of our system, of our culture, we are looking for equal opportunities. We want everyone to be able to see over that fence, regardless of how they started or regardless of what individual characteristics they may have. So the way we go about and value the differences between equality and equity has to do with the knowledge that we have, the belief system that we build along with that knowledge, and the behavior that we enact in turn. So now what I'd like to do is, rather than my rambling on about it, is demonstrate, show me. So let's look at this little video and look at the illustrations here.
The winner of this race will take this. It's a $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you've never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn around and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I have said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run their race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was back on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the lead that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.